You are searching for the key. You have read the books. You have tried the meditations. You have attempted to restructure your habits. But the fundamental, visceral friction of existence remains. The universe feels heavy. Your potential feels locked behind an invisible wall of resistance. Why? Because you are looking for a technique when you should be grasping a law. You are seeking a gradual, gentle improvement when what you require is a radical, instantaneous transformation of your deepest life condition. You are trying to climb the mountain of enlightenment when the true secret is that the mountain is already inside you. For thousands of years, the ultimate truth was held captive. It was shrouded in complexity, reserved for the elite few who could dedicate decades to monastic separation, arcane scriptures, and grueling ascetic practices.
The message was clear. You, the average person, burdened by work, family, and desire, were inherently too impure, too ordinary to access the highest reality. This distance between the ordinary person and the highest truth is the root of all suffering. It is the spiritual lie that keeps humanity perpetually struggling at the base of its own potential. We were taught that the path to Buddhahood was a slow, agonizing process spanning countless lifetimes, a journey of accumulation and purification. But what if that entire structure was a deliberate, tragic misinterpretation? What if the ultimate power, the absolute mechanism of the universe, was not only accessible right now, but was meant to be the core engine of your daily, messy life? This is the secret that demanded 50 years of persecution, torture, exile, and near execution to reveal.
This is the ultimate conclusion of the Lotus Sutra, the single, concise phrase that Nichiren Daishonin risked everything to place into the hands of the common people. In the 13th century, Japan was a land steeped in superstition, political chaos, and natural disaster. The established Buddhist schools had become complacent, obsessed with rituals and political favor, offering only empty promises of salvation in a distant future heaven. They preached detachment while the people starved. And then one man stood up. Nichiren Daishonin was not born into wealth or power. He emerged from a fishing village, a commoner who entered the monastic life driven by a single, terrifying question. Why does the suffering never end? He plunged himself into the vast ocean of Buddhist scripture, spending decades comparing and contrasting every major teaching.
He was searching for the single definitive teaching that held the power to fundamentally change the age, the teaching that could transform a chaotic, corrupt world into a peaceful, enlightened land. He was looking for the sword that could cut through delusion instantly. His search culminated in a realization so profound, so revolutionary, that it immediately placed him in direct conflict with every authority of his time, religious, political, and military. He realized that the true core of Shakyamuni Buddha's enlightenment was not the complex web of teachings, nor the elaborate rituals, nor the distant heavens, but a single unifying law expressed in the title of the Lotus Sutra, Nam-myo Renge Kyo. But this was not just a philosophy. Nichiren understood that the law was an active mechanism, a
technology for transforming life. And to prove its power, he had to live it fully, testing the law against the absolute maximum resistance the universe could offer.
His declaration was not a gentle suggestion. It was a confrontation. On the 28th day of the 4th month in 1253, Nichiren stood atop Mount Kiyosumi and declared his name and his mission. He announced the establishment of the true Buddhism, based on the ultimate teaching of the Lotus Sutra. He didn't seek followers, he sought warriors of the law. He immediately began to diagnose the spiritual sickness of the nation, pointing out that the popular Buddhist practices of the time, specifically the Nembutsu school, were leading people toward ruin by encouraging them to rely on external power, rather than awakening the power within. This was considered treason. To challenge the established faith was to challenge the foundation of the state itself. The persecution began instantly and never ceased for the rest of his life. His life became the ultimate proof of the law's power.
Every exile, every beating, every starvation, every near decapitation was not a setback, but a necessary step in forging the ultimate tool for human liberation. He understood that for the mystic law to be truly accessible to all people in this corrupted, chaotic age, it could not be presented as a fragile, protected treasure. It had to be forged in fire. It had to be tested against death itself. This intense, lifelong persecution was the crucible, and the final great secret he revealed was the result of that crucible. It was the realization that the power of the universe, the fusion of reality and wisdom, was available through the sound of your own voice. The confrontation was total. It was not merely against jealous monks or ignorant officials. Nichiren was challenging the spiritual inertia of an entire civilization, a resistance so deep it manifested as physical violence designed to silence the truth before it could take root. They burned his dwelling.
They attacked him with swords in the darkness. They drove him into the cold mountains of Izu, starving and exposed. He met every assault not with retreat, but with greater conviction. He was testing the absolute limits of the human spirit when anchored to the mystic law. He understood that if the law he proclaimed was truly the ultimate teaching, it must be indestructible. It must be stronger than fire, stronger than starvation, stronger than the combined military and religious might of the nation. His life was the demonstration. The stakes reached their absolute peak in 1271 at the Tatsunakuchi execution grounds. This was the final, definitive test. They arrested him under false charges and marched him toward the beach, fully intending to behead him under the cover of night. He was not afraid. He was triumphant. He saw this moment not as his defeat, but as the moment the law would finally reveal its true, unassailable power.
As the executioner raised his sword, a brilliant orb of light, described in some accounts as a celestial body, flashed across the sky. The soldiers were terrified, blinded, and scattered. The execution failed. The sword that was meant to sever his life failed to strike him down. This was the moment of revolution. Nichiren later termed this event the moment of casting off the transient and revealing the true. Up until that point, he had been operating as the messenger, the student of the Lotus Sutra.
At Tatsunokuchi, he revealed himself as the person who fundamentally embodied the law for the latter day, the Buddha of this chaotic age. His body was mortal, but the law residing within him proved to be immortal. Following this definitive failure to execute him, the government, unwilling to admit the obvious miracle, exiled him to Sado Island. Sado was known as a death trap, a frozen, desolate graveyard for political prisoners.
It was on Sado, amidst the bitter cold, isolation, and near starvation, that Nichiren completed the forging of the ultimate secret. Sado was his spiritual Mount Everest. He did not spend his time despairing. He spent his time writing, consolidating, and codifying the law that had just saved his life. He realized that the mystic law was not something distant, attainable only after eons of practice or through the grace of a remote deity. It was the fundamental rhythm of the universe, and it had to be made immediately accessible to the ordinary, struggling person. This conviction resulted in the inscription of the Gohonzon. The Gohonzon is not an idol. It is not an image of a person. It is a mandala that maps out the essential reality of life, the fusion of objective reality and subjective wisdom. It is the visual representation of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, surrounded by all the potential life states, from hell to Buddhahood, all existing simultaneously within one moment of life.
By inscribing this mandala, Nichiren provided the technology. He took the abstract, cosmic truth revealed in the Lotus Sutra and rendered it into a concrete, usable form. He revealed that the secret to accessing the ultimate power of the universe was not through complex meditation or asceticism, but through the simple, disciplined focus of chanting that sacred phrase, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. The intense persecution, the near-death experiences, the freezing exile, all of it was necessary to prove that this law could withstand anything. If the law could protect its champion against the state's sword, it could certainly transform the cancer, the poverty, the depression, and the despair of any single human being who dared to embrace it. He did not just teach the law, he survived by it.
His final secret, the great revelation he left before his passing, was this: the power that saved him at Tatsunokuchi is the exact same power residing in the life of every single person who chants the Daimoku. The universe is waiting for your voice to call it forth. This radical accessibility, this democratization of enlightenment, was Nichiren's greatest heresy against the religious establishment of his time. In 13th century Japan, salvation was a commodity. It was reserved for the wealthy patrons who could fund temples, the elite monks who devoted decades to esoteric study, or the common people who simply prayed for rebirth in a better realm after death. The idea of attaining Buddhahood in this lifetime, within this body, while dealing with the mundane struggles of taxes, disease, and broken relationships. That was, for the established orders, pure theological blasphemy.
But Nichiren insisted that the power of the universe was not locked away in some distant paradise or hidden behind layers of complex ritual. It was the inherent potential within every farmer, every merchant, every soldier. It was the dynamic life force pulsing beneath the surface of suffering. His persecution was not merely a political event. It was a theological declaration. Every time the government tried to silence him, every time a rival sect tried to assassinate him, they were inadvertently proving the truth of the Lotus Sutra.
The sutra itself predicts that its practitioners in the latter day of the law will face relentless opposition, insults, and even physical violence. Nichiren understood this opposition not as failure, but as validation. The deeper the suffering, the clearer the proof that he was fulfilling the mandate to reveal the ultimate teaching for this chaotic age. He was not inventing a new religion.
He was stripping away centuries of distortion and elitism to reveal the original, potent core of Shakyamuni's enlightenment. The law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo was the diamond hidden within the mountain of Buddhist philosophy. He took the suffering that everyone experiences, the inevitable cycles of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and declared that this suffering was not a punishment. It is the fuel. Your challenges, the crushing debt, the stubborn illness, the inescapable conflict, these are the raw materials for manifesting Buddhahood. They are the very environment in which the mystic law performs its alchemy. When he finally retreated to Mount Minobu, the years of exile and struggle were physically over, but the work was not. He spent his final decade writing, consolidating, and ensuring that the law would survive his passing.
He knew that the ultimate secret had to be written down, codified, and handed over to the common people, not to the political structure or the established priesthood. Nichiren's final act was not about establishing a dynasty of priests. It was about establishing the fundamental practice that empowers the individual. He gave the average person the blueprint for their own transformation, the key to unlocking their own inherent power. The great secret he revealed is not a hidden doctrine whispered only to the initiated. It is the profound realization that the moment you decide to face your life with the courage and disciplined focus of the mystic law, you are no longer a victim of circumstance. You become the protagonist of your own cosmic revolution. You become the master of your own destiny, because you have called forth the ultimate power that saved the mentor himself. The path he walked was paved with genuine cruelty.
It wasn't philosophical debate conducted in the comfort of a monastery. It was exile to desolate, frozen islands. It was political isolation. It was the constant threat of assassination and the final, terrifying moment of near execution at Tatsunokuchi. These experiences were not setbacks. They were the furnaces that forged his conviction and clarified the very mechanism of the mystic law. That moment on the execution ground, standing before the sword, was the pinnacle of his revelation. It was there, at the absolute edge of death, that he shed the transient aspect of himself and fully revealed his eternal mission. The sudden, blinding phenomenon that struck the executioner and caused the officials to flee was the ultimate validation, the final proof that the mystic law protects those who dedicate their lives to its propagation. This event, the supreme test, did more than just save his life.
It confirmed the validity of the entire teaching and marked the decisive moment when he transitioned from being a prophet warning the nation to the founder of the ultimate practice for the latter day of the law. He had proven through his own life that the ancient prophecies of the Lotus Sutra concerning its devoted practitioner were true. The suffering he endured was the necessary friction required to reveal the diamond hidden within the earth. What did he do with this ultimate proof? He codified it.
He didn't write another complicated philosophical treatise accessible only to scholars. He inscribed the Gohonzon. This is the tangible, physical manifestation of the Great Secret. It is not an idol. It is not a deity to be worshipped externally. It is the ultimate diagram of life, the map of the universe contained within a single human being.
It is the embodiment of the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and it is the life state Nichiren established through his own struggle against the forces of darkness. When you look at the Gohonzon, you are seeing the entire 10 worlds, from hell to Buddhahood, arranged in perfect, harmonious order, with the mystic law at the center. It is designed to act as a mirror, reflecting the inherent ultimate potential back to the person who is chanting. The Gohonzon is the blueprint for your cosmic revolution. It is the technology that allows the average suffering individual, the one crushed by debt, tormented by illness, or paralyzed by doubt, to align their life with the rhythm of the universe. When you chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo before it, you are not praying for salvation from without. You are demanding that the forces of hell and hunger within your own life submit to the sovereign power of your inherent Buddhahood.
You are literally tapping into the same power that deflected the sword at Tatsunokuchi. This is why the practice is so demanding. It is not passive meditation. It is an act of spiritual warfare waged against your own limitations and the fundamental darkness that seeks to extinguish hope. Nichiren gave us the key, but he also gave us the instruction manual. The purpose of the practice is to manifest the same iron-willed courage and unstoppable life force that allowed him to survive the greatest persecutions in Japanese history. He defined Buddhahood not as some distant ethereal state achieved only after death, but as the concrete, dynamic capacity to transform suffering into value, right here, right now, in the midst of your daily life. The revelation was that the ultimate power is not held by a god in the sky or a priest in a temple. It is held by you, the common person, armed with the discipline of the mystic law. The power of the mystic law is not theoretical.
It is not an abstract concept debated in a sterile monastery. Its power is measured by the blood and sweat of the man who risked everything to establish it. We must understand that Nichiren's life was not a pleasant journey of quiet contemplation. It was a relentless 50-year war against fundamental darkness. He faced the full force of governmental oppression, the fury of established religious sects, and the constant threat of assassination. He was exiled to the Izu Peninsula for his first major warning to the nation. He was nearly murdered by a mob at Komatsubara. And then came Tatsunokuchi, the moment when the system decided to silence him permanently. The moment the executioner's sword was raised and the lightning strike deflected the blade. That was not a miracle sent by an external deity. That was the raw power of the law manifesting through a human life dedicated absolutely to its truth. It was the universe confirming that the life state of Buddhahood is indestructible.
After that moment of near execution, Nichiren was exiled to Sado Island, the freezing, isolated wasteland considered a death sentence for political prisoners. This was his greatest test, but it was also his most profound victory. Sado was the crucible where the ultimate secret was formalized.
stripped of all followers, all comfort, all worldly protection, facing starvation and exposure, he did not waver. Instead, he used that isolation to write his most important treatises, including The Opening of the Eyes and The Object of Devotion for Observing the Mind. It was on Sado that the full scope of his mission crystallized. He realized that his life, his suffering, his very existence was inextricably linked to the truth he was proclaiming. He realized that the ultimate truth of the universe, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, is not something outside of human life, but the very essence of the enlightened human being.
This is the second layer of the great secret. Nichiren did not just teach the law, he embodied it. He revealed the oneness of the person and the law. Before Nichiren, the great masters of Buddhism taught the law through philosophy, through scriptures, through rituals performed by priests. Nichiren declared that the ultimate law resides within the life of the common person, and that his life, Nichiren Daishonin, was the living embodiment of that ultimate law. His physical body, scarred by persecution, was the living Gohonzon, the living diagram of the universe. When he inscribed the mandala, he was charting the reality of his own life state, a state that had faced the deepest hells and emerged completely sovereign. Why does this matter to you, sitting here today, fighting your own battles of debt, illness, and doubt? Because when you chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, you are not merely repeating a sound.
You are invoking the life state of Nichiren himself, a life state that survived execution, exile, and constant betrayal. You are aligning your own vulnerable, suffering existence with the ultimate state of indestructible courage and absolute happiness. The practice is the mechanism for fusing your life with that law. Your suffering is not a detour, it is the raw material. Your moment of greatest despair is your Sado Island, the necessary crucible where you must decide whether you will succumb to fundamental darkness or manifest the indestructible life force of the Buddha. The law, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, is the ultimate technology for accelerating your human revolution, transforming poison into medicine. But that transformation requires you to stop viewing the practice as a soft prayer for external help. It is a vow, a commitment to manifest the same iron-willed determination that defined Nichiren's entire existence. He gave us the law. He gave us the technology.
Now, the burden of proof rests entirely on your shoulders. You must prove the truth of the law in your own life, in your own environment, in the midst of your specific, messy reality. That is the final, non-negotiable instruction. We speak of the law, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, as an eternal principle. But we must never forget the specific, bloody crucible in which it was forged and revealed to humanity. This ultimate secret was not handed down on a mountain in a moment of peace. It was revealed at the edge of the executioner's sword. Imagine Nichiren at Tatsuno-kuchi, September 12th, 1271. He is 40 years old. He has been hunted, betrayed by his own disciples, and dragged to the executioner's grounds outside Kamakura. This was the final test. This was the moment where the law either proved itself indestructible
or vanished into the historical footnotes of failed religious movements. Nichiren stood there, not in fear, but in absolute, defiant certainty. He was not praying for rescue.
He was asserting the truth of the universe against the fundamental darkness of the ruling authority. He declared that his life was the pillar, the eyes, the great ship of Japan. He was staking the entire future of humanity on his own existence. And in that precise moment, when the executioner raised the blade, the law manifested. A luminous object, a flash of light, struck the executioner and the guards. The sword shattered. The execution failed. The authorities were terrified. They had been stopped by a force they could not comprehend, a force that superseded human violence and political degree. They realized this man could not be killed by conventional means. That moment at Tatsunokuchi was Nichiren's shedding of the transient and revealing of the true. Before that moment, he was the votary of the Lotus Sutra, a mortal priest fighting for the truth. After that moment, he was the Daishonin, the true Buddha of the latter day of the law. He had fulfilled the prophecy.
He had successfully endured the great persecution of the transfer of the law. He had proven, through his own life, that the ultimate, indestructible life state of Buddhahood is accessible even when facing the deepest, most profound hell. The subsequent exile to Sado Island was not a punishment. It was the necessary solitude for the inscription of the Gohonzon. Sado was the ultimate proving ground, a desolate, freezing island where food was scarce and death was constant. It was here, in the midst of absolute suffering, that Nichiren articulated the profound theory of Ichinen Sanzen, a single life moment possessing 3,000 realms, and inscribed the mandala that defines that reality. When you look at the Gohonzon, that scroll, that diagram of the universe, you are not looking at a piece of art or a symbolic representation.
You are looking at the life state of Nichiren Daishonin at the moment he realized his own indestructible Buddhahood while standing in the midst of the deepest possible suffering. It is the map of courage. It is the technology for transforming the poison of your current reality, your debt, your illness, your despair, into the medicine of absolute enlightenment. This is why the law is so potent. It is not theoretical peace. It is battle-tested, forged in the fires of actual persecution. When you sit down and chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, you are invoking the life state that survived Tatsunokuchi. You are calling forth the inherent determination that allowed Nichiren to survive Sado. You are aligning yourself with the ultimate, relentless, iron-willed commitment to truth. Your problems are not unique, but your response must be unique. Your response must be the manifestation of the law.
You must stop waiting for external circumstances to change and realize that the entire universe is waiting for you to manifest the life state that Nichiren revealed. That is the burden of proof. That is the final instruction. Prove the law in your life. When Nichiren returned from Sado Island in 1274, the shogunate had effectively admitted defeat. They had failed to crush the man, and they had failed to silence the law. The exile was revoked. But Nichiren did not return to Kyoto, nor did he seek comfort or political influence. He withdrew. He chose Mount Minobu, a deep, remote sanctuary in the mountains. This was not retirement. This was the final,
strategic positioning for the transmission of the mystic law. For 9 years, Minobu became the forge where he solidified the foundation for everything that would follow. He was no longer focused on engaging the political power structure in the same way.
His work now was internal, training the disciples, compiling the definitive writings, the Gosho, and ensuring that the methodology of the law would survive his physical death. At Minobu, the law was codified. He was teaching his followers how to use the Gohonzon, how to rely on the Gosho, and most critically, how to internalize the life state of the bodhisattvas of the earth. He knew that the moment he passed, the persecution would shift from him to his disciples. They needed absolute, unshakable conviction. The great secret he was cementing during those years was this: the power of the universe is not locked away in complex rituals, esoteric meditations, or pilgrimages to distant lands. It is locked within the single moment of your life, manifest through the sound of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo.
His entire 50-year struggle, the debates, the arrests, the near execution at Tatsunokuchi, the freezing solitude of Sado, was necessary not to create the law, but to prove its absolute unyielding power under the most devastating conditions imaginable. The law had been tested by fire, by ice, by betrayal, and by the sword. It survived. Therefore, he could confidently leave it as the ultimate weapon for every ordinary person facing the ordinary hells of daily life. He was not teaching a religion dependent on him as a figurehead. He was transferring the ultimate technology of self-mastery. Imagine the weight of that responsibility. He was the first human being in the latter day of the law to fully embody the life of the Buddha of the original teaching. He carried the burden of establishing the practice that would lead humanity out of the darkness of perpetual suffering.
When Nichiren speaks of the single moment of life possessing 3,000 realms, he is not presenting an abstract philosophical concept. He is describing the immediate, tangible reality of your own potential. You do not need to wait for a revelation. You do not need to earn your enlightenment through decades of severe asceticism. Your Buddhahood is already inherent. The chanting is the engine that burns away the delusion and unlocks the power that Nichiren proved under torture. The law is profound precisely because it is simple. It is simple because the price for its validation was paid in full by Nichiren Daishonin. His suffering was the ultimate proof of concept. This is the meaning of the transfer of the law. It is not the transfer of a doctrine. It is the transfer of the spirit that says, I will never be defeated by the circumstances of this existence. And that spirit is now yours. You are the inheritor of that battle-tested conviction.
When you feel overwhelmed, when the debt seems insurmountable, when the illness is relentless, you must remember the lineage you stand in. You are not a victim of karma. You are the agent of its transformation. The law demands action. It demands courage. It demands that you stand up and declare that your life, right here, right now, will manifest the indestructible reality of the mystic law. The time for hesitation is over. The time for waiting for a sign is finished. The only sign you need is the sound of your own voice chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo.
That sound is the roar of the Lion King, echoing the determination forged on Sato, solidified at Minabu, and transmitted directly to you. Prove the law. That is the final instruction. When we speak of the mystic law, we are not speaking of a gentle meditation practice designed merely to calm the nerves. We are talking about a technology for fundamental life transformation.
Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is not a prayer requesting intervention from an external deity. It is the assertive act of aligning the microcosm of your existence with the macrocosm of the universe. It is the engine that converts the heavy fuel of suffering and karma into the pure, limitless energy of absolute happiness and wisdom. Think of it this way. Nichiren, through his life and death struggle, provided the ultimate user manual and the power source. He showed us that the switch is always accessible. The switch is your voice. Nam is the active devotion, the commitment to practice. Myoho is the mystic law itself, the fundamental rhythm of life and death. Renge, the lotus, symbolizes the simultaneity of cause and effect, that the seed of Buddhahood and the flower of enlightenment exist in the same moment. Kyo is the sound, the voice, the vibration that connects everything. When you chant, you are not begging for a miracle.
You are activating the universal law embedded deep within your own life. You are declaring that your inherent nature is the Buddha of limitless freedom. This is why the practice demands consistency. It demands discipline. It is the daily forging process that takes the raw iron of your current self and turns it into the tempered steel of a victor. The daily practice is your proving ground. It is where you face the demons of doubt, of laziness, of historical karma. Every morning and every evening, you step onto the battlefield of your own life, armed with the determination to reveal your highest potential. You cannot merely understand the philosophy of Nichiren. You must embody the conviction that he proved under the executioner's sword. The law is validated not in ancient texts, but in the radical transformation of your finances, your health, your relationships, and your ability to pull others out of the darkness. Your suffering is not a punishment. It is the ultimate opportunity.
It is the fuel necessary to demonstrate the power of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo in a way that nothing abstract ever could. Stop living small. Stop accepting defeat as inevitable. The suffering of the past, your past, Nichiren's past, was the fertilizer for this moment. You have been given the ultimate secret, the technology of the universe, purchased at the highest possible price. Now, the burden of proof rests on you. Your life is the sacred text. Read it, write it, and make it the greatest testament to the power of the mystic law ever witnessed. The time for theory is over. Manifest the impossible.